Getting into the reflective activities assignment, I'm going to begin to speak about my childhood. So, which childhood experiences do you feel impact the way you see the world? Growing up with two supportive and loving parents is a fragment of my childhood that has always shaped my perception of human to human relations. Nuclear families were the only family systems I had observed within my family, so it wasn't until I had realized that most often that is not the case for others did I become comfortable to talk about topics of separation and single parent families with other people. Becoming a child and youth worker was one of the things my parents had always supported me in. Knowing that I would not be in the position I'm in today had it been for my parents makes me realize that for the kids who do not have these support systems, education may come after things such as survival. A child and youth worker at my placement states that sometimes a child's potential can only go as far as their parents, which in this context is true. All these experiences and more have worked to shape the way I see the world. Moving to experiences. Oh, sorry. How does this awareness make you more effective? Um, Being a part of an authoritative, structured family, I can understand the importance of the balance between warmth and control. I can observe and identify the behaviors that determine whether a child has too little love or too much control, or the other way around. Now that I've been exposed to such high levels of diversity within my program and within placement, I'm more comfortable to talk about the client and things that I couldn't once relate to, such as like their own cultural norms, separation, disturbances within the family system, etc. Attachment is something I firmly believe in, and I honestly think that it does affect the psyche of the child tremendously. Just because as a child I was always put to bed with my back being scratched, and even now, like that's the one thing that I find like a lot of comfort in. So I could see that through those experiences, attachment is a necessity in raising a child. Um, the knowledge I've gained throughout my childhood allows me to understand the effects of the microsystem and the complexities of the mesosystem, where all the systems interact and affect one another. For example, understanding the influence family may have on things such as education is something I've always been able to truly understand through my personal upbringing. How does your learning relate to client self-determination? Although my parents provided me with a lot of support in going to school, picking my program and doing well in school was my own responsibility, my own decision to make. With that being said, um, I've learned a lot about taking control about my own life and just choosing the own directions that I think is good for myself. And I think that there's power in making your own decisions, because whether it results in a good or a bad outcome, you're going to be learning from the decision that you made regardless. So it's a win-win situation is what I call it. Um, so the power of making your own decisions is really something that can shape you as an individual. Making your own decisions in life is what aids life in teaching you those valuable lessons. Just making your own decisions can be powerful, as I said before. In my placement, I always encourage the women to think for themselves and make their own decisions, just because I know the effects of being able to have that power and what it could give to you. The next question is, how will you use this knowledge about your growth process in your work with the client group you are currently working with? Be specific. So since the women and children in my shelter are all fleeing from cases of domestic violence, I like to give them the control that was taken back from them. Encouraging these women to control their lives in healthy ways, such as advocating for oneself, can empower them to stay out of the relationship. Although some women may talk about going back to their abuser, making refraining from advice giving extremely difficult, knowing the power of making your own decisions helps me steer away from advice giving and towards theories such as cognitive behavioral therapy, where you're helping your client walk through their situation um, for the first time with a clear mind and observe and make connections around things such as the cycle of abuse. So kind of being able to take them out of that situation into a place where they can rationalize everything that happened and kind of put emotion to what was happening, so that they can see the cycle, they're familiar with it, they can identify it in their life, and then they see it as a cycle of abuse that affects them. and they don't allow it to consume them as much when they know what's going on. So moving into adolescent years. Um, so growing up in high school, I was always really social with a lot of people, but in grade 11, it wasn't until there was 8 girls who had it out for me. They did not like me. They wanted to beat me up, and it got to a point where I almost moved to an all-girls school just to get away from them. Um, so growing up with those experiences, I kind of realized the importance of not being a bystander, and this includes being those people that just stand by and choose not to say anything at all, because it's true, they become one of the perpetrators. They become, and sometimes it hurts more to see those people stand by and do nothing than it actually does for that person who's confronting you. So having that experience makes me think more in depth about um, the effects of like when communication goes bad between two people. So being able to realize that like we need to intervene now is an important thing that I've learned. Growing up, some of my friends have experienced things like getting diseases, so something that they'd have to live with their whole entire life, and trying to find good things, trying to pull out strengths within those hard situations can be very difficult. So being able to see bad situations as opportunities for improvement and in building your strength is just the only option in situations like that. How does this awareness make you more effective as a child and youth worker? So, having these experiences, these real life experiences where people are experiencing something that they can't necessarily change in the moment, it just solidifies the fact that we're all people and no one's different than any other. Resiliency and ideas to foster that into a child's life who's experiencing hardships is absolutely mandatory in order for them to see it in a good way and to identify strengths through those hardships. How does your learning relate to client self-determination? I always say to my clients, there's beauty in the struggle and ugliness in the success. Um, Experiencing hard times can challenge you as a person to develop these support systems, to find those resources. And I think at the end of the day, it all builds onto who you are and it makes you stronger. Moving on, how will you use this knowledge about your growth process in your work with a client group you're currently working with? So just because I'm in a placement with high anxiety, all these women are constantly worrying about these legal battles with their abuser and just dealing with trauma and everything around them. I kind of teach the women the value of living in the moment and encourage positive thoughts, which evidently results in positive behavior. I always say that the more time you spend on worrying about the things that will only affect you later on in life takes away from the moment that you're given now. And that moment can be something you're completely blind to if you don't take the time to realize, you know, the importance of having that moment. How to deal with conflict. So as a child, I was a little bit more of an introvert and preferred to observe people in my environment. Because of this, asserting myself is oftentimes difficult. My mother always taught me about communication and about being considerate of other people's feelings, so I took that into consideration. But it wasn't until my adolescence where I could exercise all these skills to solve my own problems and identify areas for growth. One of these areas for growth is, like I said, being able to stand up for myself and being able to um, voice what I'm feeling, even though, I don't want to cause any disturbances. It's important that if you feel something, you have that power to advocate for yourself and let that out. And how you communicate is also important. So working on, different ways you can say how you're feeling and being mindful of not, insulting the other person or anything like that is really important. Positive family influences and their impact on your work as a CYC. So I'm going to look into my book and find 3 traits that have helped enhance my work as a CYC. So one of the traits that I pulled out was dependable. No matter what friend I had, they always told me that I was really dependable, which I think I get from my parents because they're always looking to help people if they need anything. So I've kind of I've kind of taken after them in that sense. The next one's sensitive. My mom was always very sensitive growing up, and that's kind of why I battle with, being able to discuss my, being able to assert myself, in conflicts and stuff. But she's taught me how to be expressive, so how to put those emotions into words, which is something that I feel benefited me as a CYC, because now I can model and teach other people that. Independent. My parents were independent growing up. They moved from New Brunswick to Ontario when they were dating as young. So just being able to, you know, realize that I've got to make my own decisions just as much as they have to get where I'm going. Um, that's a huge learning milestone, whatever. um, Running out of time. Well, I've run out of time, but negative family influences. Okay, the first one is irresponsible. So sometimes you want to gear away from your responsibilities so you can have a little fun, and that's kind of something that I have to keep track with. Following through on tasks is another thing. When my supervisor tells me something, I've got a lot going on in the day, so just making sure that I follow through or follow up with those things is very important as well. And my second one is being emotionally unstable. So because my placement is in such an emotionally charged place, I'm completely challenged by balancing these emotions and finding time for myself so that I don't break down emotionally and take it too hard. So one thing that can kind of help me in making sure that those things don't impact my work is just self-care. So taking care of myself, putting time aside to deal with my emotions, maybe vent a bit. So yeah, those are some of the ways I can make sure that they don't affect my work. Conclusion: addressing issues from your childhood is difficult, which many people may work on throughout their adult lives. Finish up your assignment with a straight-faced statement. Okay, so I always say that you may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them. So just making decisions every day is important, and deciding to be happy is one of them, no matter what you're experiencing. I always tell clients that it's not about how much weight you're carrying, it's about how you carry it. So again, just thinking strength-based and endorsing all of these positive thoughts is a real important part of aiding people to get better and aiding people to be empowered by these hardships, which is probably the biggest part of work with people. So this is why I like what I do, and I think that being able to influence someone to think positively can change their whole world. And if you can change their whole world, then I think that makes a difference, because we can't change the world, but we can change somebody else's world. And that would be my conclusion. So thank you for listening. Sorry for running a little bit over time, and I will see you in class.